But what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think of the Sema show, ARMO, and his whole group? Is this wonderful or what? The difference now and what we saw 20 years ago is instead of a lot of individuals who had businesses and jobs in this industry who came to kind of hang around with people in similar business from Sema, is now ARMO exists, not as a collection of individuals, but as an industry. And we are a force to be noticed and reckoned with, and we matter and exist in the automotive aftermarket. And if you like all that, then you're going to be glad about my next presentation. This is one of the good parts of being involved with this, is when you get to congratulate a friend. And I'm going to congratulate our newest inductee to the ARMO Hall of Fame, one of the guys who probably should have been the first one, and that's my dear friend Chuck Blum, who's seated in the back there. Chuck Blum. For those of you who don't know it, Chuck Blum was the president of ARMO for many, many years, going all the way back to the early 60s, when they had just a few people gathered with their products. Sema. When Sema was just a tiny organization with a few guys who got together and wanted to establish safety standards for their speed parts. I have just a short little thing to tell you about here with Chuck. Chuck only did a few things for the founding of ARMO. And in order to keep it brief, because I tend to talk too long, I've written it down to just 10 bullet points that Chuck did. Just 10 things. First, Chuck listened. When I was introduced to him at a Sema function and said, you know, Sema ought to pay attention to the restoration market. Chuck wasn't familiar with the industry. He says, you mean like Model Ts and stuff? How big could that be? I said, well, I have clients with 100 employees. And so it began. Next thing Chuck did was he investigated. He checked out our marketplace. He sent people to shows like Carlisle and Charlotte and other places with us. He read and researched and found out what was going on. Then Chuck envisioned. He saw what could happen. You know what Chuck saw all those years ago? He saw this. He saw the huge ARMO contribution to Sema. He saw leaders in the making who would rise from the ranks of ARMO to get on the board of directors of Sema and go to the chairman of the board of Sema, Corky Coker, for example, and now several others on the board. Chuck saw that all those years ago. Chuck planned. He knew that to create an operating council like ARMO, to create a functioning, effective organization, certain things had to happen. And so while I was trying to figure out what to do, Chuck was figuring out how to show me what to do. Next, Chuck assembled a team of highly talented and effective Sema staff members. He put me together with several of them who sat down and beat me over the nose with a wet newspaper so I would do the right things to create something that actually worked. And then Chuck set out to educate us, each of us. He told us what would go wrong and how it would go wrong. He told us what we could do if we wanted it to work, and he told us the pitfalls, the things to be careful for, and he made us ready to launch ARMO. And then Chuck insisted. Chuck insisted that every one of us on this group trying to build this thing had written goals with written benchmarks, and he insisted that we achieve them. He would not allow us to fail. Then Chuck guided us through the pitfalls and the problems and the things that happen anytime you get a social group like a club or a committee or whatever. He showed us what it would be and he led us through it. Chuck supported us. He stood behind us even when we had some pretty stiff challenges early on when some folks from outside of the ARMO world sort of wanted to get hold of ARMO for maybe their own particular needs. Chuck was there like a stone wall and wouldn't let it happen. And he protected us again and again and again when we faced major challenges from organizations and our industry. He protected us from issues like clunker laws, licensing issues that we weren't ready to deal with yet as individuals. Finally, what Chuck did was take the rest of us as his hands and build ARMO. So if you like what we have now as a group, then I'd like to ask you to give a big, warm round of applause to my friend, Chuck Wood. Fortunately for you, this is a total surprise. Speech compared. I gave it a lot too long. But I can tell you this, that it was a labor of love. Jim Wirth and I did it together. I know it was in Phoenix, Arizona. I know exactly when it occurred. And from that point on, we knew that ARMO was going to be a success because this is a good industry with a lot of great people. And that's why you succeeded. Not because of me or Jim or anybody else here, but because of work you have done. You made this organization what it is. You made ARMO as strong as it is. And if anybody should be getting applause, it should be you, because you guys are the ones that are doing it. On behalf of everybody, thank you for that effort. I'd like to also thank the Select Committee and all the members of ARMO for giving me this award. It's certainly appreciated very, very much. I've been gone for industry for about almost 10 years now. It's nice to be remembered. But talking about the early days of the stone wall, Chris Kirsting, the current chairman of the board, and I were talking. In the early days, it was licensing issues with Detroit and General Motors. And Chris and I were reminiscing about how we went up there and got our teeth handed. It was the first time we went up there. And it's quite a good ordeal, wasn't it, Chris? A lot of fun. But thank God we prevailed in the long run. I'd also like to say that nobody was more devastated when they heard the news about Jeff Moses as I was. That was a terrible tragedy, as is John Mensler. John and I go back to the early 80s. And, he's the first guy I ever met who chewed my butt out royally at a Sema show because I wasn't doing things right. That was another shock to my system. But those are the people that made the thing great. Sema and ARMO, they made it great that it is today. Anyway, I don't want to talk forever. Thank you very much for this recognition and award. Thank you.
Got a couple more words to give out.